This year, Christmas was supposed to be special. My husband and I decided that instead of spending it at home, we would travel to his parents' house, 4 hours away, so the kids could enjoy Christmas with their grandparents. It seemed like a wonderful idea at the time, a big family Christmas, everyone together, festive meals, laughter, and all the magical moments we wanted for our boys. But now, I am sitting here questioning everything, wondering if I was in the wrong or if my mother-in-law completely crossed the line. Let me backtrack a bit. Since we were going to be spending Christmas at my in-laws' house, I thought it would make the most sense to have all the kids' presents shipped directly there. With 3 young boys and a car packed to the brim with luggage for a holiday away, there was no way I could have brought everything with us. My mother-in-law, to her credit, was more than happy to help. She graciously offered to wrap all the presents before we arrived. At the time, I thought it was incredibly sweet of her. Wrapping presents is one of those tasks I actually enjoy, but considering we were traveling and dealing with the chaos of packing and getting everyone ready, I appreciated her offer. I spent weeks carefully planning out what to get for the kids. I wanted this Christmas to feel magical for them, and I poured my heart into it. From big-ticket items like personalized toys with their names engraved on them to small stocking stuffers, every gift had a story and a reason behind it. Some of these gifts had been pre-ordered months in advance because they were custom-made, and I was so excited to see the boys' faces light up when they unwrapped them. These were not just gifts, they were moments I had envisioned, memories I had imagined. Fast forward to yesterday. We arrived at my in-laws' house, exhausted but happy to have made it in one piece. The kids were thrilled to be at Grandma and Grandpa's house, running around exploring the space and settling into their shared room. Once they were occupied, I finally got a chance to sit down with my mother-in-law and ask her about the presents. She reassured me that everything was under control, most of the gifts were already wrapped, and she just had a couple more to finish up. She mentioned that the presents were all stored in the basement. I offered to help her finish wrapping the remaining gifts, thinking it would be a nice way to bond and, frankly, because I wanted to see how everything looked. But she waved me off, insisting that I should rest after the long drive. Feeling a little awkward but not wanting to push the issue, I went back to the sitting room to join my husband. We spent the next couple of hours chatting, watching the kids play, and generally unwinding. Eventually, my mother-in-law went upstairs to take a nap. I found myself with some downtime and curiosity got the better of me. I decided to sneak down to the basement to check on the presents. Not because I did not trust her, but because I was genuinely excited to see them all wrapped up and ready for Christmas morning. The basement was quiet and cool, the way basements always are, and as I walked over to the stack of gifts, my heart swelled with anticipation. There they were, beautifully wrapped in festive paper, just as she had said. At first glance, everything seemed fine, but as I started looking closer, something caught my eye. The larger presents, the ones I had spent the most time planning and the most money on, all had gift tags taped to them already. Curious, I flipped one of the tags over to see which child it was addressed to. That is when my heart dropped. In big, bold letters, the tag read, "From Grandma." My stomach churned as I picked up another, and then another. They all said the same thing, "From Grandma." At first, I thought there must be some kind of mistake. Maybe she had labeled the gifts incorrectly. But the more I looked, the more it became clear, this was intentional. The big, impressive gifts, the ones I had handpicked and ordered with so much thought and care, were now being credited to my mother-in-law. My gifts. My effort. My money. I felt a mixture of anger, disbelief, and sadness all at once. How could she do this? Why would she do this? These were not her gifts to claim. I tried to calm myself down, reasoning that maybe it was a misunderstanding, that maybe she did not realize how much effort I had put into these gifts. I went back upstairs and found my husband. Quietly, so the kids would not overhear, I told him what I had found. His response made my blood boil. Apparently, his mother had mentioned to him that she wanted to put her name on a few of the gifts because, as she put it, she did not want to disappoint her grandsons. And my husband, without consulting me, had agreed to it. He told me it was not a big deal, that it was just this one Christmas and that we should let it slide since we would not be spending another Christmas at their house anytime soon. I could not believe what I was hearing. Not a big deal. To me, it was a very big deal. It was not just about the tags, it was about the principle. These gifts were from us, their parents. We had worked hard to make this Christmas special, and now she was swooping in and taking credit as if she had done it all herself. I tried to explain this to him, but he dismissed my feelings, telling me to let it go and not make it into an issue. But I could not let it go. When my mother-in-law came back downstairs from her nap, I decided to address it with her directly. I told her that I appreciated her help wrapping the presents but that I did not think it was right for her to put her name on the gifts without asking me first. I tried to keep my tone calm and measured, but it was clear she did not take it that way. She became defensive almost immediately, telling me that I was being selfish and ruining Christmas. She said she just wanted to see the joy on her grandsons' faces when they thought the gifts were from her, and that I was overreacting. The conversation escalated quickly, and before I knew it, she was in tears, accusing me of being ungrateful and making her feel unappreciated. Now I feel stuck. On the one hand, I feel justified in being upset. These gifts were from us, and she had no right to take credit for them. On the other hand, I cannot help but feel guilty. What if I am ruining Christmas, like she said? What if I am overreacting? My husband thinks I should just let it go, but every time I think about those tags, my stomach churns all over again. Should I leave her tags on the gifts and apologize for confronting her? Or should I stand my ground and replace the tags with ones that reflect who the gifts are actually from? I do not want to create more tension, but I also do not want to let this slide. I feel so conflicted and I do not know what to do. Am I the one in the wrong here? Or is my mother-in-law completely out of line? Update 1. Thank you all for your advice and support on my last post. After reading through the comments, I realized I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt and frustrated by the situation. It was a relief to know I wasn't alone in thinking my mother-in-law had crossed a line, and it gave me the confidence to take action. I decided that waiting until everyone went to bed and replacing the tags myself would be the best way to handle it without escalating the situation further. At least, that's what I thought. That evening, after the kids were tucked into bed and my in-laws had retired to their room, I grabbed a set of blank gift tags, a pen, and a pair of scissors. My heart was pounding, but I kept telling myself I wasn't doing anything wrong. These gifts were from me and my husband. They reflected the time, effort, and love we had put into making Christmas special for our boys. Reclaiming that didn't make me selfish, it made me a parent who wanted her kids to know their parents cared deeply about them. The house was eerily quiet as I crept down to the basement. The stack of gifts loomed in the dim light, and I took a deep breath to steady myself before getting to work. One by one, I started removing the "from Grandma" tags and replacing them with ones that said, "from Mom and Dad." With each new tag, I felt a little more like I was setting things right. I was about halfway through when something about one of the larger boxes caught my attention. At first, I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It wasn't the wrapping paper I had sent along with the presents, and the box seemed slightly larger than I remembered. My stomach nodded with unease, but I brushed it off as a trick of memory. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off, so I decided to unwrap a small corner of the paper to check inside. What I found stopped me in my tracks. Instead of the personalized train set I had ordered months ago, a gift I had spent weeks researching and customizing for my oldest son, there was a generic, store-bought version of a train set. No names engraved, no special details, just a run-of-the-mill toy you could grab off any shelf during the holiday rush. My heart sank. This wasn't the gift I had chosen. It wasn't the gift I had paid for. My hands trembled as I unwrapped another box. This one was supposed to contain a custom superhero cape I had ordered for my middle child, complete with his name and a little emblem that matched his favorite character. But when I pulled back the paper, I found a cheap, polyester cape that looked nothing like the one I'd ordered. My pulse quickened as I moved on to a third box. The personalized wooden puzzle I had ordered for my youngest son was gone, replaced by a mass-produced version I could have picked up at any toy store for a fraction of the price. At that moment, it all clicked. These weren't mistakes. These weren't accidents. My mother-in-law had swapped out the gifts. She had gone out of her way to return the items I had so carefully chosen and replace them with cheaper alternatives. I couldn't fathom why she would do such a thing. Was it to save face in case the kids didn't like the gifts? Was it some power play to undermine me as a parent? Or was it just her way of asserting control over the holiday? I didn't have the answers, but I felt sick to my stomach. I abandoned my mission to replace the tags and rushed upstairs to find my husband. He was still awake, scrolling on his phone in bed, and the moment he saw my face, he knew something was wrong. I told him everything, how the gifts had been swapped, how they weren't even the same items I had ordered, and how I was certain his mother was behind it. At first, he looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe what I was saying. But when I showed him the boxes, he couldn't deny it. He admitted he had no idea she had done this and agreed it was completely out of line. For a moment, I felt vindicated. At least he was on my side now. But as the reality of the situation sank in, I felt overwhelmed. This wasn't just about gift tags anymore. This was about trust. My mother-in-law had taken something deeply personal, something meant for my children, and twisted it into something else entirely. It wasn't just disrespectful, it was calculated and cruel. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, trying to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers and hold her accountable for what she had done. But another part of me feared the fallout. This wasn't just some petty squabble, it was a full-blown betrayal, and addressing it could shatter the already fragile peace in our family dynamic. I didn't want to ruin Christmas for my kids, but I also couldn't ignore what had happened. The next morning, I avoided my mother-in-law as much as possible. Every time I saw her, I felt a wave of anger and hurt wash over me, but I forced myself to smile and act normal for the sake of the kids. I kept replaying the events in my mind, trying to make sense of her actions, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't come up with a justification that made any sense. As the day wore on, I found myself questioning what to do next. Should I confront her and risk a blow-up that could ruin the holiday? Should I let it go for now and deal with it later, once we were back home? Or should I take a stand and reclaim the gifts, and the credit, before Christmas morning? I honestly didn't know. All I knew was that this Christmas wasn't turning out to be the magical experience I had envisioned, and the person responsible for that was the very person I had trusted to help make it special. Update 2. After discovering the swapped gifts, I knew I couldn't let this go unaddressed. The whole situation had already escalated far beyond what I thought it could, and now, it wasn't just about some gift tags or even the gifts themselves, it was about trust, boundaries, and respect. I decided to sit down with my husband that night after the kids were asleep. If we were going to resolve this, it needed to start with us being on the same page. Or so I thought. When I confronted him about the swapped gifts and demanded to know if he had known anything about it, he initially insisted he was just as blindsided as I was. But as I pressed further, his face betrayed the guilt he was clearly feeling. After several tense minutes, he admitted something that completely floored me. His mother had been complaining to him for months about feeling left out as a grandmother. According to him, she had expressed how much it hurt her that we lived so far away and that the boys didn't get to see her as much as they saw my side of the family, who lived much closer to us. She apparently felt like she wasn't as much a part of their lives as she wanted to be and had been looking for ways to feel more connected to them. Somehow, she had come to the conclusion that being the hero on Christmas morning, the one whose name was on the big, exciting presents, would make her feel like a bigger presence in their lives. I sat there in disbelief as he explained this to me. I understood wanting to feel involved. I really did. But this was not the way to do it. Instead of talking to us or trying to spend more quality time with the kids in a way that made sense, she had decided to stage some bizarre power move on Christmas morning, actively undermining us as parents in the process. She hadn't just overstepped, she had bulldozed right over every boundary we had as a family. What angered me even more was that my husband seemed to think this explanation somehow justified her actions. He acknowledged that what she did was wrong but then suggested we compromise by splitting the tags. His idea was that some of the gifts could say, from grandma, and others could say, from mom and dad. He genuinely thought this would solve the issue and keep the peace. I refused. Why should I have to compromise when she had already taken it upon herself to rewrite the narrative of our family Christmas? She didn't ask us. She didn't involve us. She just decided, unilaterally, that her feelings mattered more than ours, or, for that matter, more than the truth. Compromising would only validate her behavior and set a precedent that this kind of thing was okay. And it wasn't. By this point, my frustration was through the roof. I decided I couldn't sit on this any longer. The next evening, once the kids were occupied, I went straight to my mother-in-law and confronted her. At first, she played innocent. She feigned confusion, insisting she didn't know what I was talking about when I mentioned the swapped gifts. But when I brought out the evidence, the boxes, the wrapping paper, the generic toys that were clearly not what I had ordered, her demeanor shifted. She broke down crying, and what she said next left me absolutely stunned. She admitted that she had returned the gifts I'd ordered because she thought they were too extravagant. She said she felt like the personalized toys and custom-made items would overshadow anything she could give the boys, and it made her feel inadequate as a grandmother. So, she decided to replace them with simpler, more generic gifts that wouldn't make her feel outshined. In her mind, she was doing the right thing by making sure the boys didn't see her as less than us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just about feeling left out or wanting to be involved. This was about her insecurities taking precedence over what was supposed to be a magical experience for the kids. She had taken gifts that I had spent months planning and poured my heart into and reduced them to something that fit her narrative. And then, on top of that, she had the audacity to try to claim credit for them. I told her, as calmly as I could manage, that this wasn't about her. It wasn't about me either. It was about the kids. Christmas morning wasn't supposed to be about who gets credit for the gifts, it was about creating memories and joy for the boys. I reminded her how much time and effort I had put into choosing those gifts and how deeply hurtful it was for her to not only disregard that effort but to actively undermine it. But instead of taking responsibility, she turned it back on me. She accused me of being ungrateful for her help and said I was making this all about myself. She stormed off in tears, leaving me standing there shaking with anger. It was clear that, in her mind, she was the victim, and nothing I said was going to change that. The tension in the house was palpable for the rest of the evening. My husband, caught in the middle, tried to mediate, but it only made things worse. He didn't want to pick sides, which only made me feel even more isolated. I felt like I was fighting this battle alone while everyone else was more concerned about keeping the peace. Now, I'm at a crossroads. Part of me wants to pack up the kids and leave before Christmas morning. I don't want to sit through an awkward, tension-filled day pretending everything is fine when it's not. But the thought of disrupting the kids' holiday, especially after everything they've been looking forward to, breaks my heart. I also know that leaving would only make me look like the villain in my mother-in-law's eyes, and I'm not sure I have the energy to deal with the fallout. On the other hand, staying feels like a concession. It feels like letting her win, like saying her behavior was okay when it absolutely wasn't. I've already decided that I'm putting my tags back on the gifts, no matter what. But beyond that, I don't know what the right move is. I feel like I'm stuck in an impossible situation, and no matter what I do, someone is going to end up unhappy. Update 3. That morning felt heavier than it should have. I kept going over the same questions in my mind. Should we pack up and leave after the kids opened their gifts? Would staying just validate her actions? Could this Christmas be salvaged at all? As I tried to make sense of everything, the sound of the doorbell startled me. My father-in-law's voice carried down the hall as he greeted someone, his tone polite and casual. Then I heard him call my name. Curious and slightly apprehensive, I got up and walked to the door. What I saw made me freeze in place. Standing just inside the entryway was my father-in-law, and behind him was a massive stack of boxes, far more than I'd ever expected to see. Each one had my name printed neatly on the shipping label. My heart started to race as I stepped closer, recognizing the logos of the small businesses I had painstakingly ordered from months ago. I crouched down and ripped open one of the boxes. There it was, the personalized train set I'd ordered for my oldest son, the one with his name beautifully etched onto the wooden engine and cars. It was perfect, just as I had imagined it when I placed the order. My hands trembled as I opened another box. Inside was the superhero cape for my middle son, his name stitched boldly onto the back along with the emblem of his favorite character. Box after box revealed the gifts I had thought were lost, the custom wooden puzzle, the handmade dollhouse furniture, the monogrammed backpacks for school. They were all there, every single one of them, exactly as I had envisioned them. I turned to my father-in-law, who was watching me with a quiet, knowing smile. He waited for me to process what I was seeing before he spoke. I had a feeling something wasn't right, he said softly. His words hung in the air for a moment before he explained. When my mother-in-law had mentioned returning some of the gifts, he'd overheard her comments about them being too much and how she thought simpler gifts would be better. He hadn't known the full extent of what was going on, but he'd trusted his instincts and taken action. Quietly and without fanfare, he had tracked down the original orders, contacted the companies, and had the gifts sent back to the house. I was stunned. My father-in-law had always been the quiet one in the family, more of an observer than a participant in the drama that occasionally unfolded. But in this moment, his actions spoke louder than words ever could. He had seen what was happening, understood that it wasn't right, and had taken it upon himself to fix the situation. And he had done it without asking for credit or stirring up further conflict. Tears welled up in my eyes as I stood there, surrounded by the boxes that represented months of planning and love for my kids. He could see how overwhelmed I was and gently offered to help me rewrap everything and put the proper tags back on. I nodded, barely able to speak through the lump in my throat. We spent the next couple of hours in the basement, unwrapping and rewrapping the gifts with the care and attention they deserved. As we worked, my father-in-law opened up in a way I hadn't expected. He talked about my mother-in-law and her insecurities, about how she had always struggled with feeling like she wasn't enough. He explained that this wasn't the first time she had let those feelings cloud her judgment. She wanted so badly to feel important and loved that sometimes she crossed lines without realizing how hurtful it could be. She means well, he said quietly as he smoothed out a piece of wrapping paper. But sometimes her insecurities get the better of her. His words stuck with me. While I was still angry about what had happened, hearing this gave me a new perspective. It didn't excuse her behavior, not by a long shot, but it did help me understand where she was coming from. It also made me feel grateful for my father-in-law, who had seen through the chaos and done what he could to make things right. By the time we finished, the gifts looked beautiful, each one carefully wrapped and labeled with, "From Mom and Dad." The stack of presents felt like a victory, not just because I had reclaimed what was rightfully ours, but because I knew now that not everyone in the house was against me. My father-in-law's quiet support had meant more to me than I could ever express. Later that evening, I knew I had to confront my mother-in-law one final time. I waited until the kids were in bed and the house was quiet, then approached her in the living room. I told her about the gifts being returned and how I had replaced the tags. I didn't raise my voice or accuse her, but I made it clear that what she had done was unacceptable. I also told her that I understood she was trying to feel more connected to the boys, but that this wasn't the way to do it. At first, she was defensive. She tried to justify her actions, saying she didn't want the boys to feel overwhelmed or spoiled by over-the-top gifts. But as the conversation went on, I could see her walls start to crack. She finally admitted that she had acted out of insecurity and that she hadn't considered how her actions would affect me, or the boys, for that matter. Her apology wasn't immediate or perfect, but it was there, and it was a step in the right direction.